Welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today we are doing our 5th episode on cupping. Number 5. It's also our 25th episode.
Whoa.
But today we're doing it on acidity. And Dad, you've been working on this one.
I have. I've been to many classes on acidity. I remember going to a coffee chemistry seminar for a week on this.
Wow.
And I've done other courses, and it's actually a huge topic when it comes to coffee because it's so important to tasting good coffee.
And as you and I were going through this, I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions as well as far as whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing. But it seems kind of a little bit mysterious or mistaken in the coffee world.
There's some miscommunication, like lots of things in life. Acidity has been, for coffee, has been given a bad rap, basically.
I don't want acidic coffee. Do I?
What's that?
Oh, I'm just saying it sounds like, the way it sounds in the world at the moment is that,
You're
someone
right.
wouldn't want that.
Yeah, as soon as you say the word acid, you've got flashes of things. This is going to be sour in my mouth. It's going to be hard on my stomach.
Battery acid, heartburn.
Oh, yeah, all that sort of stuff. And my doctor says this, let's buy some low acidity coffee. And you've gone down a path that's not quite factual in that sense.
Right. It's not necessarily what we mean when we talk about acidity within coffee.
That's right. I mean, basically, it's acid versus acidity, and that's why versus, because they have very different things. An acid and we talk about the word acidity.
Right.
I looked up the Webster's Dictionary. I'm always looking up the Webster's Dictionary.
That's all you ever read, it feels like.
Oh, yeah. After tea, it's always good to have a read of the dictionary. But it defines the word as having a very sour or sharp taste. There you go. That's factual.
Factual.
I then go to the Specialty Coffee Association, and their definition says contributing to a coffee's liveliness, sweetness, and fresh fruit character. That's a whole different realm.
Already better.
Yeah.
Those sound like things that I actually want.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think in our notes as we've been going through, you said that coffee contains, was it 850?
Very good. Plus.
And
It's probably growing as we talk.
It's multiplying. No, it's not.
850 plus unique tastes and aromas. It's a very complex. That little bean has a lot of things going on inside it, and it's packed with stuff. And acids are a huge part of what's going on inside the bean, and particularly organic acids.
And they're an important part of the makeup of the way we taste coffee, what it tastes like. It's an important piece of that one, 850.
That's right. It's when I said organic acids, and it's organic. It's part of the bean's makeup.
Right. And on average, coffee has on the pH scale a pH of 5.
That's right.
5. But, and I admittedly did not know this before we had even talked about this, but the lower the pH, the more acidic it is.
And the higher you go, the more alkaline. It's right. And it's sort of backwards to our thinking. But you're right, 5 is right, which is getting very much close to the middle, which would be the same as saying close to the neutral inside, close to purified water would be in that. So it's just very neutral when we talk about acidity.
Yeah.
In fact, when you say 5, you're talking about the same, I believe, as the pH of carrots.
Interesting. Which I don't think of carrots as, in my head. I don't think of those as acidic, but I think, it's again, a different definition of acidity.
That's right. And there are some, and we're going to look at this, there are some more, just the green beans themselves growing have a little more acid in them than other ones do in other countries. And you can go up suddenly to a 6, and as you go up, it's getting more acidic. And now a 6, you're talking about potatoes.
Yeah, well, and I think that one other thing to keep in mind is that acidity, if you have more acidity, that doesn't mean that you're losing body.
That's right.
Like, it's not one or the other with these things that we've been talking about. You can have a very acidic, very high body. I sometimes think in my head, body equals lower acidity because it's more of like a heavy, thick. I think of like milk versus, I don't know, vinegar or something.
Right.
Vinegar is very viscous, but also acidic.
Yes.
Milk is not
That's
acidic and less viscous.
Which is sort of why on the when you use different forms to tabulate what this coffee tastes like, and we've done last week, we looked at body. That's a separate thing, and you give it a score out of, in our notes and forms, you give it a score out of 10, 0 being no body, 10 being so much body, so thick I can't move my tongue anymore. And then you move across and you forget about that and you think acidity. What's that one doing? And that's a whole different category looking. You're going to give it another score between 0, no acidity, to 10, to really high quality acidity. Not battery acid, but a high quality acidity is going to get a high score.
Right. And I think that's an important piece to think. And we've said this before, but it's that whole stopping, slowing down, and thinking about it. You're not thinking about, okay, what does everything taste like, all at once? You're thinking, what does the body taste like? And then moving on to, today we're talking about acidity. How does that taste? And is it adding to the cup? Is it making it a better cup? Or if it's something that's not making it taste good, I'm going to score that low for the quality of the acidity there.
That's right. Which it's good for the end result when you get a score, overall score. This is where I find forms actually good, that they help you be a little more, rather than being subject, you're being objective about it. And it gets a high body score, a low acidity score. Therefore, it gets sort of not a bad score. If it gets bad body and bad acidity, it's going to have a low score.
Right. Acidity is it is very desirable. It's something that we want.
That's right. And I mean, the most acidic coffee out there is probably, I believe scientists have found it's 4.7, which is the same as a banana.
And when you put it like that, it's funny. You get lemon flavors, you get citric flavors from coffee, but the acidity is not the same as the citrus flavor you might be tasting.
That's right. And when you taste a banana, perhaps a greener banana, you do get this sort of suddenly taste going on. Woo, this is a bit whatever, and maybe the acidity is moving up.
Right.
And a ripe banana is probably going to be a little better than that. And because I always tell people, and they come and talk to me and say, low acidity coffees, can you sell me one? Can you tell me how I can make less acidity in my coffee? And there are ways of tweaking it slightly, but I often ask them, what else are you putting into that black cup of coffee?
Yeah.
And they go, what do you mean? Well, hey, did you put half and half in? I hadn't heard that before I came to the States, but half and half. And they'd say, yep. Did you read on the label of the half and half label? It says, I wrote it down there. It says, may also contain pH adjusting agents and stabilizers. I mean, what does that mean?
That sounds healthy.
It does. And then they say, oh, I put a little flavor in too. What do you mean you put flavor in? Coffee already has flavor. You don't need to add flavor to it.
Yeah.
Well, you do. I want an ice cream. I want a hazelnut blackberry note. And I put these bottles of flavor into it. And I look on the label of those and it has a similar sort of label saying this has pH. This has acid going on here. Then you can add, and then by the way, I always add like three tablespoons of sugar as well. Like going, holy, is there room in this cup of coffee for coffee?
Right. I mean, all the things we add to it are going to change the flavor of that.
Would I be able to have a tissue, sir?
Oh, yes.
I've been trying to tell him that, but I'm just going to ask.
If you're watching the video, he was pointing at me. I wasn't 100% sure what he was pointing at.
That's much better. Thank you,
makes
son.
more sense. Okay. Well, to get back to the cupping side of it, when you're at the table, when you're cupping at the table, what are some words that bring out, like when you're tasting acidity?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. What are some of those words?
Actually, what you say there, that is difficult because you've got words acid, acidity, perceived acidity on the tongue, in the stomach, and there's a lot of, you can go sort of wrong here. Organic.
A lot of words with definitions.
Yeah.
But when you're tasting, what are some of the things that you typically hear or say?
The typical two words I hear the most would be, this is bright and sparkle.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, you get a sparkly water, whatever, and it's got this sparkle on there, or it's bright. It's not I'm talking about the color bright. I'm talking about it's bright. It's got flavorful.
I think of it kind of like on a drum kit.
Yes.
You have the snare drum, which is a crack. And it's very, oftentimes a sharper tone, a harsher tone. And then you have the bass drum or the kick drum, and it's a much more low end kind of hit. So there's a difference in kind of that feel of like the sharp crack versus the soft hit.
Will I be allowed to use that in my next cupping?
You can.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
My favorite one, by the way, I've written down here, I've got in capitals on our notes here.
All capitals.
And I like to say, when I taste acidity in a cup of coffee, of black coffee, I go, wow. Wow. And that signifies, if anyone knows me and cupped with me before, so he's tasting acidity.
Do you say wow about other things that are good though as well?
I get excited when I cup coffee, and I may do, but I tend to hold that back for acidity.
Reserve it for acidity.
If it's got a good body, it's more woo. So it's a more woo rather than a wow.
And something that happens with coffee, and specifically cupping as well, this can be a factor, is if coffee sits for a while.
That's right.
If coffee sits for, like I think of coffee, if you're at work having coffee, you can oftentimes, after, maybe an hour or two, if you go back to that same pot, if it's still there,
Poor guy.
you taste it. And it tastes way more bitter, way more acidic, in air quotes.
Which we're going to get onto this moment. I mean, there's probably going to be a quinic acid, which is one of the acids in there. There's many of them. And coffee sits there. It carries on the reaction because it's hot. The hot plate's heating it up. That's causing a reaction like the old Bunsen burner. Yeah, the old Bunsen burner on the old chemistry days. And that continues to cause reactions.
Right.
And, quinic acid and others that go on too long get this suddenly that like it is like whoa, not wow.
And a lot of those
like,
acidic, things that we're tasting, those are oftentimes going to be the ones that are less not desired,
not desirable. Yeah,
those are going to be the ones we don't want. And those are the ones we tend to think of when we hear acidic.
I remember when I used to get coffee from places I shouldn't have got coffee from, but
places that shall not be mentioned.
No, what I did try and do, I must have known something about it though, because I would wait till I saw them change the pot and put a new lot of coffee in, and it drips through. Then I'd go, "Oh, could I have a cup of coffee, please?"
How long would you wait at said place?
Oh, well, some places it took actually, no, it didn't take that long. A lot of people would have the coffee, and so they would run out pretty quick. So it had a little glass pot underneath, and that would run, as soon as that ran out, they'd make a new lot of coffee. And fresh. Yeah. And it still was yucky stuff. I look at it now, but it was one way of not realizing I was actually enjoying the fresher stuff than the stale stuff that had been on the hot plate, and these chemical reactions had happened.
And I think that that's an important thing to note, because if you are cupping, obviously over time that flavor is going to change with extraction, with all those different components being a part of that. And there are chemical things going on with acidity specifically that are going to affect that as well.
The good things though with cupping is you don't have a flame, you don't have a hot plate. So it's not carrying on, giving it more energy and changing stuff. It's just cooling rather than heating up.
Right, which is a little bit different, but we are still going to get some bitterness at the end. And that's something, if you're at home and you're just drinking a cup of coffee, it's something to keep in mind as well. Is, if, I hope you don't do this, but if you do, you make a cup of coffee, you don't get to it, you come back to it and you heat it up, reheat it. Reheat it. But if you do that, you're going to...
about to faint here.
I know. It's okay. It'll be done in a second. But if you do that, there is going to be changes to the flavor. It's not just heating up the same flavor. It's going to heat up and change.
Funny story, a quick one, was that this week I was at cupping... it was one of our staff was saying, someone in his family, how they make their cup of coffee. And I hadn't heard it quite made this way, but he would make a typical black coffee in a
like a drip machine or something?
Yeah, automatic one. That he'd ground the coffee before in the night and put it in and thought that was wonderful. But he then would pour a cup of black coffee into his cup. He would put half and half sugar in it, stir it slightly. Then he'd put it into the microwave. It's hot. So he puts it in the microwave and puts it in there for 1 minute.
Wow. For already hot coffee.
Coffee, takes that coffee and puts it in a thermos now, and that's his coffee for the day.
For how long? Like the whole day?
Yeah, the whole day. I'm sure the thermos kept it fairly warm, but it was boiling.
That
went into the
really hot.
Yeah, and anyway, that was just interesting. I thought, and my friend was trying to tell him actually, let's just do it more easy, and you're going to find this thing called flavor, and it's called coffee.
Yeah, he might be able to do 2 cups a day.
Yeah, that's right.
One when he needs it, and the other one when he needs it again.
I'm diversing.
No, but that's interesting. I mean, all those things are going to obviously change the flavor. You had an experiment we could try.
It's a good one if you're home.
For acidity.
You won't be able to do this if you're driving in a car.
It's not a microwave with a cup.
No, I'm not going to. Don't do that. Don't do that. And if you're in a car, just do it when you get home.
Yeah, don't do this while you're driving.
That's right. And I would suggest buying a bunch of apples. I'm not working here for
all the same apples.
No, all different ones. So you're going to get.
We should get an apple sponsor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Perhaps New Zealand's known for good apples.
Ooh,
mate, they could sponsor us. They get five different ones. Making sure one's like a Granny Smith and one's a Red Delicious, for instance, and get whatever ones you get in between there.
Yeah.
And taste them all. Just slice them up. Taste them all and put them in a row of which one's more acidic and which one's less acidic.
Grade them for yourself.
Grade them for yourself.
Yeah.
It's a simple thing to do. And just by that, you are perceiving acidity on your tongue, and you're going to notice. I mean, it's not hard rocket science to say the Granny Smith is going to be the most intense.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the Red Delicious was the least intense. They both have acids going on, but one is that they're perceived differently on the tongue.
And I think that that's an interesting point as well, because the perceived acidity can oftentimes be different than what we see as the pH level.
Right.
Because I think of coffee and I think of a carrot. I think, well, I've had coffees that are way more acidic than a carrot. And they may have been actually a lot closer than I was thinking. So
right.
that perceived acidity is really something to start testing.
I think the science is still out on the whole acidity in the stomach. And I think, as I say, there's other things going on. They're not just coffee.
Right.
Often you're told not to drink it if you've got reflux and stuff. But I think there may be some other things going on there that needs to be looked at. And I don't know if coffee's the thing you have to just completely dish or get a low acidic coffee, because I don't know you're going to find one other than a very dark black coffee.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So perceived acidity, it's good to know.
Yep.
It's a good test. That's something I might have to do after the podcast here.
Good.
I mean,
Get some
do it
apples.
again. But roasting.
Yeah, there's.
Can roasting I know we talked about roasting and the was it the Maillard reaction in the body?
That's right. Yeah, they're all happening. All these chemical reactions are happening.
So, which is crazy to think about. We can change roasting for body, but we can also do it with acidity.
You can.
And it's happening at the same time.
That's right.
So you have to keep track of those two things at the same time, because what we do for acidity is going to affect the way body is affected in the roast. So how do we affect it with
I was going to
roasting?
say, you're going to blow your mind, because I said, right, they're getting 850 plus of these things, attributes going on in a coffee. Taste,
Right.
a lot
We're
of them
tweaking all of them at
acids.
the same time.
So you've got 850 different chemical reactions going on. And so it's not just body and acidity, although a lot of it is that.
I think of it this way.
Yes.
So think of like a mixing board. You know, like when you think of a sound system, you think of a
I like
big
this.
mixing
Yeah, I
board.
like where it's going.
You've got a song that plays for 4 minutes, let's say, or there's a band playing. Through that song, you've got 850 different volumes you can adjust.
Ooh, I like this.
The bass, all sorts of different things. While you go through that song, if you adjust the treble or you adjust the mid, it's going to affect the way the whole song sounds. And so by the end of that song, your board's going to be set up in a way that, you know, oh, this is how it sounds. You know, like if you're doing a sound check. By the end of that sound check, you're going to have the board set up the way you want. And it's kind of like roasting. By the time you're done roasting, you've created this profile or this way that you
like
roast
that.
it, time, temperature, that's going to make it, it's going to affect it. But again, when you move one thing, it affects everything.
And then
Yeah.
you change the group that are playing the music up there, a whole different group from
Right.
a rock and roll to a classic or something. The whole board's going to need to change again.
Different coffee, different types of roasters,
Different beans.
different batch sizes
yeah.
or quantities that we're roasting.
Huge differences going on there. But
So that in mind,
yeah, sorry, well, another thing I'm going to have to steal from you. Chemically, when we talk about acids, I mean, I don't understand this totally, but
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
yeah, no, that's right. There's people out there who do, and I appreciate them.
Yes.
But it means it's giving off hydrogen ions in an aqueous solution like water or something. And those ions, they give off active neurons.
So we've got hydrogen ions.
That give off active neurons
Wow.
on the tongue. And the tongue picks that up and sends a message up to the brain.
Wow.
And these things are doing different dimensions, different levels as such of intensity as such. And the brain sort of sorts it all out to different flavors going on here. And when we roast, we can change that up slightly.
Right.
Of how starting early hotter temperature, changing the length of temperature, changing the length of time. It can change up when acids change, when ions are perceived, when they're not, all that sort of thing.
Well, that's interesting too, because you could have the same farmer providing coffee to the two different roasters, and they roast it for the same amount of time, but their temperatures might be different, or they roast it for different times, but the same color, darkness, or, you know, however, if they could essentially make two of the same coffee from the same farm, and it could taste different as far as even just acidity or body, those things as well. But
so advice is find yourself a good roaster.
yeah,
And there's a lot of them out there. And but some are going to keep the bad acids, some are going to keep the good ones. But I guess the trick is here.
Hopefully, none of them try and keep the bad ones.
No, I don't think they try and do that. But as a roaster, you're trying to balance it out and taste your coffees, like we're talking about cupping. Taste them and see. Actually, when I prolong that part there, it's made my coffee much sweeter, less acid, which is maybe what I want, or whatever.
Yeah. So when we're tasting acidity or we're
Right.
tasting acids
Yes.
within coffee, I guess let's dig a little bit deeper into what we're actually tasting.
It's like putting fruits in your mouth, like lemons and grapefruit and all these different things, mangoes and such. But
It's a lot of fruit in your mouth.
yes, not all at once.
Not all at once, no.
But when you taste acidity, I mean, words like sharp is going to be there. It's the sharp, it's like you get pricked with a pin.
I think like a paper cut.
Yeah, it's sort of like, and that's why I go, wow. Not ow, but wow.
So if I give you a paper cut, you'll go, wow.
yeah, okay. Obviously there's a pleasant aftertaste rather than a sour, like, ugh, this is horrible. But there's a pleasant aftertaste. You go, actually, this is really nice.
Zestiness,
Yeah,
a
that's
zing.
right. And it often is towards the front of the tongue, but there's science out there that says it's not always the front of the tongue. It can be the sides of the tongue.
Would you say this? Now, I would like to clarify this with, we do not condone licking batteries, but and don't try this at home. But if one was to grab like a 9-volt battery and lick it, that kind of that electrical zapping flavor.
That's right.
Have you?
Yes.
Is that kind of what we think of when you think of
is
acidity?
You
It's that zing?
you can't go too far with that because you don't want to electrify
No.
yourself.
Right.
But I have used that example of that wow factor of it is this sharp, suddenly, but pleasant aftertaste that goes on. And a 9-volt battery, they're those little square rectangular ones that are a little different. We've got the
Right.
two positive and negative on top there. And you
That
get,
actually may be pleasant, but it's an idea of what that zing or that brightness is.
I do agree with you. Don't try that.
Do not try it at home.
It's going to give you a dryness at the back of the mouth. Often that's a sign of acidity in the coffee under the edges of the tongue. And it all denotes the quality of the coffee. And that's what we're talking about with tasting acidity. And if you're going to put something in a box, you will taste the quality of that acidity, and you can also put another box in like a horizontal, vertical line and say it's really intense or it's not very intense.
And that's that little, like we showed it on the video from last week, but the box from the SCA Cupping sheet has intensity versus quality. That we'll put a picture right here.
And acidity has a similar sort of thing going on there.
Yeah. So what are the acids that we are tasting?
Oh,
like chlorogenic acid, does that
very
ring
good.
a bell?
Yeah, that does ring a bell. They would shorten it down to CGA.
Oh, CGI.
Because you can't say chlorogenic acid 3 times that fast.
Especially if you have to type it up.
That's
a
right.
lot.
And I'd never heard of the word chlorogenic acid before I went to some of these classes and realized, what are these acids, these organic acids that I'm tasting on my tongue? And one of them, the biggest one, is the chlorogenic acid. It's a biggie, and it's in fact in coffee. Coffee has the highest rate of chlorogenic acid of any plant, I believe.
Wow.
So it's a biggie. And the other biggie with chlorogenic acid I hadn't realized is another word that is very much associated with it, and that's the word, you ready for this? Antioxidants. And that's
Like pomegranates.
if that's what
Just
they
think
have.
of them when I think of antioxidants.
Okay, good idea. And I've often been taught that coffee has more antioxidants than an orange, for instance. And I thought orange are very healthy, but here you got this chlorogenic acid that's mostly a lot of it is in coffee, and it's good for antioxidants, and that has a good buzz to it.
That's good. That's much better than acid.
Exactly. Don't have carb battery acid, but you can have antioxidants.
Yeah.
And
okay, so chlorogenic acid, there's a lot of it in coffee.
Yep,
it can be kind of associated with antioxidants.
Yep.
Some good stuff.
And what happens is, of course, when you roast, you're heating up the coffee beans that are enlarging, and when you bring them out, perhaps at the first crack, they're going to be fairly light, and they're going to still have 50% of the chlorogenic acid, which has this bright acidic perceived acidity, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Which is why light roasts often get sort of termed in the lemon citrusy notes. If you've gone too light, it can get grassy, almost too sour-like.
Yeah.
Which, as you go roast, it doesn't take very long. We're talking about a few minutes, and you get to the dark. If you get to the second crack, for instance, if you go into that area, you're going to you're going to be down to only 20% of the
So
caloric
you're-
acids are left.
You're greatly reducing the antioxidants, the caloric acid,
Exactly.
the CGA.
Yep, you're doing that.
And there's a cool little graph that you put in here.
Oh, right, yeah.
Very simple graph.
It is
very
a simple graph, yeah.
And it kind of shows acidity over time. And I guess is that in regards to caloric acid as well?
Yes, and typically it's also, it is in relation to chlorogenic acid. It's also related to most acids that they come up and down to different parts of the roasting, but
Right.
as you get to the end, as you get really dark, they are really diminishing. They're disappearing on you.
Okay, gotcha. And so we've got CGA, caloric.
Oh, mate, sounds like going back to chemistry class here, doesn't it?
Chlorogenic, sorry, not caloric.
Caloric, that's a temperament thing. Yeah.
So we've also got quinic acid, which
Yes.
is produced as the CGA
Yes.
or chlorogenic acid
Yep.
is reducing.
Yep,
in the
as that's
roast.
disappearing, it breaks into two different types of acids. One of them is the quinic acid, which
How
is
quaint.
thank you, and that's one of the ones we said earlier that on a hot plate, often you're getting quinic acids.
This is your 30 minutes after it's been brewed, sitting at
Yeah.
work for too long kind of acid.
and it's a hot plate that is still on. Even my brewer, I have a good brewer for coffee. It has a hot plate on it, but I never turn it on because I'm going to let it come in to the plate, into the container of the coffee, and I'm going to get it used pretty quickly. If I'm going to hold it there for too long, I'll put it into a thermos so it doesn't carry on heating and getting quinic acid, which can be nice, but typically can sour the whole stomach.
Well, and just how do you avoid quinic acid? Well, drink it when you want it. Don't make it if you're not going to drink it.
Don't roast it too dark. Buy slightly lighter than you had.
Yeah.
You can get used to these things, of course, and you think, oh, dark is the most intense, and you can get used to having quinic acid.
You can get used to drinking straight buttermilk, but why would you
Okay.
want to?
Yeah, that's a good point. Moving on.
So the other one that is citric and malic acid.
Yeah, I put these two together because they're similar. Citric, we know it's sort of, oh yeah, I know what citric acid is. And lemons, grapefruit, all those sort of things. Whereas the malic, which is similar and has been produced in roasting, comes out and then starts to disappear on us.
Right.
Malic acid, which is more like the tart characteristic of a green apple. You know, that experiment I was talking about before.
Yeah.
The green, that's the malic acid coming out there. And both are being depleted during the roasting process. The darker, the more acids are broken down, which leads to actually then to a flatter a cut profile. But you'll notice the body more, not because the more bodies come out. It's just that the acid's gone away, and you're left with more body, distinguishable body that was there in the first place.
Right. Well, and I think that what's interesting is I think we've probably mentioned it before, but as you roast it darker and darker, it's kind of, I think of a pyramid. I think we've described it before, but a pyramid of all coffees at the bottom and a wide variety, starting to enter towards one singular taste and flavor profile as you go darker and darker.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk too much about lactic acid. It's another one in there.
Can build up in your legs when you're running.
You were telling me about that. I'm not
Fun
sure
fact.
how it relates to coffee, but
Yes.
anyway.
No, I mean, if you go running and you feel lactic acid, that doesn't mean that's what it. Yeah, it's hard to really taste, but
It's not going to be as punchy as citric and malic acid, but it tends to be a more textural thing. So it relates a little more to body than acidity, but it is acidity as well, and it just deepens things body wise as well. You've got
Interesting.
phosphoric acid, another one. There's two more to go here. Phosphoric, that's the one that can turn otherwise sour tasting citrus flavors into more of a grapefruit or mango
interesting.
thing here. And remember these words, because we're talking a lot of citrus notes here. You've got lemon,
Right.
you've got orange, you've got grapefruit, you've got mango. So you've just broken citrus into 4 different fruits there,
Well,
and
yeah.
they're distinguishable.
I think as we looked at in the taster's wheel last week, there's so many things that are close to each other that might be differentiated by the amount of phosphoric acid, for instance.
The phosphoric, Kenya, I had a beautiful Kenya just a couple of days ago at work, and black currant, it was like, which is really another close relationship to phosphoric acid, is that in Kenyan coffees, and it's lighter, it's more sparkling acidity, and it came out as black currant in this case, but it was really nice.
Yeah. And so after phosphoric, we have acetic acid.
Acetic.
Acetic, sorry.
Yep,
my
acetic
bad.
acid. And another one that's probably more well known, and you're going to think of a kitchen acetic acid, which is vinegar. You can
vinegar.
If you touch a little bit of vinegar on your tongue, that's the acetic acid, which is in coffee, another organic coffee.
Gotcha.
It's produced not as punchy again as that citric as malic. You're realizing now citric and malic has a real punch to it, and you notice it as such. But it contributes, it adds to a flavor to a bean, and rounded, a clean tasting cup, and that's probably the acetic acid. You don't want to go overboard with it, because as with vinegar, it's not very appealing. But it adds to the whole complexity of coffee. And we've just touched on a few.
Right.
But the point being is they make a change to your coffee.
All of them.
Yeah.
So this stepping away from, maybe not stepping completely away from coffee or from cupping, sorry, but if we want to have some low acidity, or if we want to generalize low acidity in coffee, so I'm saying, I'm going to the store, I'm going to pick up something. I'd like to hedge my bets, with a low acidic coffee. What are some tips that we can do to at least give us a better percentage of hitting a low acidic coffee?
Yeah, and as I say, there's a lot of bad press out there on what a low acidic coffee is, and I think it's more to do with the chemistry of the coffee and how it was grown rather than...
Because you may actually like acidic coffee, but you just don't classify it in your mind as acidic coffee.
Exactly. You're thinking of the battery acid again, rather compared to the organic coffee that you perceive as really good. I mean, you'd be looking at things like low elevations. It's typically thought of a low elevation has lower acidity than high elevation. And that's part of just how the plant's growing. Right. If it grows really high elevation, there's not so much oxygen. It's hard for it to grow. It works difficult. It's longer for it to grow. And that tends to bring in a lot more characteristics into the bean.
Interesting.
And often the organic acids in there get packed in tighter into a more highly grown coffee. So therefore go for a low elevation coffee like a Sumatra or something other than Kenya or high elevation Peru or something.
And we had also mentioned the darker roast, the longer of a roast time that you give it, the more you're burning off those acidic notes.
And you've got to balance
chemicals.
if you go too far, you get this ashy cigar note now because you've burnt.
Right.
And that's not what I'm talking about, a dark roast. I'm talking about something that's been balanced and gone...
And it's an appropriately dark roast.
That's a good way of putting it.
Not burnt or ashy.
You're going to go for the Arabica bean rather than the Robusta, and that's another podcast talking about the different varieties of beans.
Yeah, and then cold brew coffee, which is interesting. I've always thought that cold brew on nitro has a very extremely low amount of acidity to it.
Yep.
It can have different acidity, again, getting your mind away from... what we think of as acid, but having those bright notes. But it doesn't have that sharp zinginess a lot of times.
Or just the cold brew in the fridge that you leave overnight and let it drip slowly through.
Yep.
Tends to have a lower acidity. Then there's the biggie that you can, as I mentioned before,
the big whopper.
You can add milk, cream, you can add all sorts of things to coffee that can actually...
Nullify the acidic...
Nullify, it's probably not a word. It's not necessarily getting rid of the acidic organics, but you just don't notice them anymore because this other flavor is taking over.
There's things covering it up.
Yeah.
So acidity starts with
the plant.
Obviously, the plant. Coffee is a plant. This is no different. It's in that plant to begin with.
All those acids we've mentioned, chlorogenic, citric, malic, phosphoric, they're all in there to start with.
Right.
But they're affected in the plant as it grows, as it pops out of the soil, leaves come out. You've got things like probably the biggies would be shade and altitude, as I mentioned altitude already.
Right.
And that will change the levels of the organic acids, the caffeine, the sugars. They all get changed of just how and where the plant is growing.
And I think this is something kind of cool. It shows how much importance the farmer has in creating and growing this coffee. And I think it's cool to shed some light on how vital the farmer is, because there's things like shade, altitude, the time it takes to grow, all these different aspects that they're curating or having to at least think about that really affect what then the roaster can do with that bean.
Yes, and as you're saying, I think that time, the farmer, it takes all year. The roaster, we have 15 minutes with it, and we can make a change in 15 minutes, but he's got to do it all in a year.
And if he makes a mistake, he can't just roast another batch.
No, you've got to wait for next year. It's like, that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah. So we've got the plant itself, also the species and variety.
Oh, well, that's we were sort of talking about that before.
And again, I mean, also, I guess, to tie in with that, different continents and different countries obviously are different terrains. So that's going to be a part of that as well. But
you've got the Robusta that I was talking about that typically has twice as much quantity of these acids between the chlorogenic acids. They can be a bit bitter and vegetable taste as well. But and part of the good thing about those is like the chlorogenic acid, it's sort of a natural defense to insects and things. But it doesn't taste very nice to the insect, and it doesn't tend to taste very nice to the human as well.
No. And then the last, or I guess second to last here section is the processing method. And I will say we will glide across this because I think these are three things that are good for another episode. Sometime.
People will enjoy knowing the differences of these. I'm just going to use three here. There's way more.
Right.
But they have a huge impact on the coffee. But as we're talking about organic acids, it has a huge impact on, a tweak, I should say. It does have an impact, but a tweak on the final acids in the cup.
And so those three processes are washed, natural, and pulp, or pulp natural.
Yes.
That we're going to talk about. So the washed, how does that affect acid?
As the name suggests, washed, or sometimes called wet, the skin is taken off the coffee. It's put into a tank of water, and that gets microbes and things start eating away at the mucilage there, the fruity part of the bean. So it really cleans it out nicely. But in that cleaning out, it leaves high levels of acidity. Therefore, I mean, we can go into that, but the wash process has an impact on how much acidity is left. Of course, depending on how much acidity was in the bean to start with.
Right. And then we have our natural, which is basically everything left intact on the bean.
That's right.
Dried.
The skin's not taken off. It's left there, and the mucilage is there, and all that's, as the sun comes out, it's like an incubator, and the juices go into the bean, and that lessens the acidity of the coffee generally.
And then the last is the pulp natural.
Pulp, which is right in the middle. They take the skin off, but they don't take the mucilage off. They put it on beds, and they turn it over, and there's different colors. We'll talk about that one day.
Yeah.
And that's so acidity in that changes by how long you leave it out in the sun. And
that would be kind of, we'd place that right in the middle between the washed and the natural. We'd put the pulp natural kind of right in the middle there as far as acidity levels.
Washed, wet, and the natural are commonly called dry because there's not so much water used in it.
Right. And then, the brewing method, that can also affect the acidity that we're getting. Kind of like we talked about last week with body, different filter types, those things can take out oils or not. Brewing is also going to affect the way that the coffee tastes on an acidic level as well.
That's right. It's part of that word we've used many times already, extraction, of how long the water takes to get through the coffee.
Right.
And that has an impact on the acidity of the coffee. And you can look at the balance of acidity. You can look at the perceived strength and dilution. You can look at the sweetness, how much sweetness is left in the coffee. And that all impacts the acidity of the coffee. Like we said, the cold brew, you leave it for a long time and it's got less acidity.
Right. And then one thing that you can help, or that can help in identifying it, and I think further putting the definition of acidity in its rightful place and not thinking about battery acid or something that's different to that, would be to calibrate your palate.
Yes, you can start learning of what these organic acids, what they taste like, and then you can then extrapolate that to, I taste that in my coffee. You won't taste it all,
right? And
you can just teach yourself, actually, this is a good acid, and this is a pleasant acid. This is a more tart, and this is a more sour, whatever it may be. But I like this in how it reacts in my coffee. I like that flavor,
right?
And I would suggest doing something simple, like we're talking about the apples before. Here I'm talking about, get some lemon juice. You can get that from the grocer. That's citric acid.
Simple.
Get some green apple juice, some unsweetened green apple juice, the malic acid. You can get some brown vinegar. That's the acetic acid. And put them into glasses of water. You can even do variations of how much water you put to dilute it.
Try different dilutions.
Yep. Taste it, and you'll see that these taste different, and then think, what do they taste like?
Right.
Then you can add some sugar into it and say, I'm changing the chemical composition here, and what does that do to my lemon juice as such?
Right.
And you start getting a dictionary of, now when I taste this coffee, when they say lemon on the notes on the coffee bag or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they're right. I do taste lemons. We tasted some the other day, and I tasted 2 of the notes. The third one on the packet, I couldn't taste it at all. Maybe reasons why I didn't taste it, just with the age, whatever, the way I brewed it, badly, goodly, whatever. But that's why we put notes on those on packets, because it gives you a little feeling for this is a lemony citrus note. I'm not meaning that to be in a bad way, but just gives you a feeling. I like citrusy coffees. When I had that lemon juice at home and water, I quite like that. You can get that in coffee. Yes, you can.
Exactly. And I think those are important things to expand your palate, like we talked about in the tasting wheel last week, and understanding those things. It kind of falls in with the lexicon as well. There's, that's a great way to learn what things you're going to taste for those different flavors, like lemon and stuff like that.
And we've said it before, that lexicon that you can get online for free, it tells you that lemon note tells you where to go and buy. And so you can get sort of specific on a lemon taste compared to an orange taste.
Right. Yeah. And I think that those, all of that, that's a lot there, but that's probably only scratching the surface of acidity. It really does.
Yeah.
But it's a hugely important thing, just like body, the combination of body, acidity, all the other aspects of coffee. Again, there's 850 different things that are working and at work there to make it taste different and hopefully the way you like it.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important thing to come to understand. Even if you're not a fan of acidity, I think it's important to understand it and to be able to identify it. And I think it's going to help you as especially as a cupper, as a cupping.
Excuse me.
To better identify what's in your cup and grade the quality of that.
And I expect people now, when you drink your coffee, we talked about body, I'm hoping to hear comments now on this coffee is lively. This coffee is delicate. This has sparkle. It's winey. It's sweet.
Right.
It's snappy. It's effervescence. There's a lot of words we can use to describe acidity. And you're going to start realizing, I need to use some of those words.
Yeah. So that's our episode on acidity. And thanks again for joining us, for making it this far. And we look forward to joining you again next week. Thanks so much.